Hey, good morning. This is Jared and Nate over at Ecarriercheck. Excited to be here. Wednesday Q&A. Bring the questions. The week's been off to a good start, Nate. How's your week going?
Yeah, it's been a great week. Can't complain. Weather's been great. Just everyone in our community is awesome. So
Yeah. You know what I love about the Q&As, and obviously if you're on today, feel free to ask questions. But the questions that we've kind of really seen funneling in this week is, I'm tired of living off load boards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting all my loads from there, and so there's a couple carriers that I really specifically want to focus in on how to sell as a carrier, right? But I also want to talk about kind of some of the niche stuff that we can help you find when it comes to finding either A, those carriers that are niche, right? Or B, those shippers that are niche, right? For example, if I wanted to stay shipping pipe, right? We can help with that, right? And you get this question constantly, Nate, is, how do I find, those shippers that make the most sense to me?
Mm-hmm.
And in some particular cases, that carrier I talked to yesterday, he's just sitting there going, I'm just getting loads off the load boards. The rates are not the greatest, but I'm surviving.
Right.
But he said what he's tired of is the chase.
Mm.
Every week he's chasing and doing what he's doing. Welcome on Wednesday Q&A. We're just chatting Ecarriercheck. We're chatting how you can use our site to just help you with your day-to-day. And the other side of this is we're also, fielding questions. Shaggy's on. What's up, brother? It's good to see you, hear from you. I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah.
Shaggy was sick last week, had a little bit of I think something with his throat because he lost his voice and congested. So I hope you're feeling better, Shaggy. Definitely good to hear you.
Yep.
So if you don't mind, Nate, maybe we get, I have a voice. I love that. I'm glad that you're back. We'll get you on the show here soon.
Yep.
Because I think it's really important that we talk about some map stuff and what's going on right now in the U.S., where's freight at, and build some lanes. Exactly. So let's talk about the specific aspects of the Q&A. So we'll pull up the thing. You guys have questions? Feel free. We're just going to kind of roll here for a little bit, but really we're just trying to educate you guys on how to use our site better on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So let's pop in there and I'll let you kind of run with it here, Nate.
Yeah, Shaggy mentioned building round trip lanes. Yeah, definitely. We see a lot of Shaggy students using the site that way for sure.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing. So a couple of things, just refreshing back on some of the emails and questions we had this week was how do I stay in my niche, right? How to find carriers that match up or are in that area. We could essentially do it all. But when we're talking shippers, a couple of things that we have that ability to do is find shippers by a specific keyword, or maybe find a shipper that's from looking at carriers that are maybe doing a specific industry, and kind of going about that lines. But let's kind of just work through our shippers. And one of the things I wanted to show, and you mentioned pipe, right?
Yeah.
We can simply type the word pipe, and then I can find you shippers with the word pipe in their name. So this is one route we can go down.
Yeah.
And then essentially what you would want to do is, you can add your equipment to it. Maybe it's, the open deck.
Yep.
Right. And then we can start adding I want to find, those shippers that are working with mid-sized companies or maybe in a specific region. But as you can see here, here's my list. I got 14 pages. 50 shippers to a page.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot. I can't do the math. That's 700 shippers right there.
Yeah, that's a lot. And look at this. I got the word pipe or pipeline somewhere in that name. So what's nice is we can start working this list, start prospecting, and that's kind of one of the things I want to talk about today is how do we prospect? How do we make that first call sound like? I actually just had an email right before we came on was saying I need a call script.
Yeah.
People love these call scripts.
They do. Here's my thought about just running with a cold call. Mm-hmm. Until you're comfortable, I think it's important that you have something up in front of you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so even that carrier that I was talking to yesterday, he said, I'm terrible on the phone and I don't know what to say. And you can tell he's very he drives a truck. He does a great job. He's been driving a truck for 15 years. He wants to have, as Shaggy just said a moment ago, he wants to have a better network.
Right.
Yo, from Illinois, what's up, Ryan? It's good to hear from you,
What's
man.
up, man?
Where do you get the hiring index from? What a great question. I love this question. Nate, I'll let you kind of run through that.
And to add to what you're saying before we get into this, when I first started watching some cold call videos, you mentioned a good point. Even getting a name is a win. So if that first phone call, you just get a name, to me, that's a huge win. So take those for what it's worth. But
yeah, because the second call,
hey,
all of a sudden we went from a cold call to kind of like this warm cold call, because now you go, instead of, hey, can I talk to somebody in shipping? Now you're going, hey, is Larry around? And you change the tonality of your voice.
Yeah.
Like Larry.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I spoke with him last week, kind of thing.
Hey, where's Larry at? You pop the guy on the horn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
To me, that's a win. And,
totally a win.
And to be realistic, that first phone call may not go the way you expect. So getting a name is a win.
Absolutely. It just takes, I don't know what the percentages are. I would love to know this. I can just kind of give you just a rough guesstimate from how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Is if my call is already 50 times better if I have a name.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, it's huge to get that.
Oh, for sure. I 100% agree. But yeah, back to the hiring index here. So what this is doing, what we're trying to help you with is identify, what type of carriers are these shippers utilizing? Right. How big are these carriers? Where are they from geographically? What type of equipment do they have, and where do we see them running, right? So we look at all those factors, and we can determine, if this carrier or the shipper, is at 89%, well, we can actually take a deeper dive and see what kind of carriers he works with, and we can get a good feel if they're using brokers or not.
Oh, yeah.
From a carrier point of view, if you see shippers, working with companies like yourself, why not give them a call?
Yeah.
So,
and I'll tell you a story. I'll give you a quick story. We talk about this story a lot.
Yes.
But
I love it.
Is there a number that, if I call a 0 versus a 92, what's going to be that, right? Like, am I going to get in or not, right? And I'm going to just tell you my thoughts from this standpoint, because I always wanted to make more cold calls to people that actually wanted to move freight. Right. I bought lists, or I'd get on Google, and what a train wreck. I was calling, usually, here's the best, is when I could get a list with a name on it.
Oh, yeah.
And half the time, especially through the last 5 years, most people have transitioned to new careers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So here I am, right? And I'll get into my story here real quick. Larger hiring, and they use in-house brokers or have their own trucks. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I'll get into that in a sec, Tarjet. I'd love to know what your name is, but I really like the name of that company, Tarjet Hauling. Just kind of rolls off the tongue. But I'll give you a quick example. You can get into a 0, and you potentially can get into a 92. What our goal with the hiring index was to tell you, are they using brokers or not? Kim, nice to meet you, Kim. I'm Jared, by the way, and this is obviously Nate. Nate's the man, right? But, can you get into a 0? Can you get into a 92? Everything is going to be timing bound, right? The 0s or the lower than 40 are going to be harder to get into because of how we measure it. And I'll tell you real quick how we measure this. Let me give you some secret sauce, okay? If I have a shipper that's, from Nebraska, we're from Nebraska, and specifically Omaha, okay? And I'm getting in, you got to think, we have the greatest and the largest bill of lading database in, I don't know if there's a bigger one.
I don't think so.
Right? Yeah. And we get these sent to us every week. It's an incredible thing. But imagine the shipper in Omaha, right? And the shipper essentially is using carriers from a 200-mile radius, right? Some of them are from Nebraska right there. Some of them are from Iowa. Omaha was probably a poor example because we've got a border right there, right? Some of Omaha is over on the other side, or at least close enough it's Council Bluffs, right? Yeah. But if you have carriers, that are working with that shipper, and we see this constantly, that are right within a 100-mile radius, his sourcing or her sourcing strategy is to find local carriers and work with them, right? Now, imagine that same shipper. He's from Omaha. But instead, he's using carriers they're the size of these carriers are between 1 and say 6 and 7, right? Maybe 10 at the very most, but it's between 1 and 7. And these carriers are from all over the place. They're from Delaware and Florida and Iowa, and you have the one guy that's from Iowa, but that's it, right? That tells me that they're using brokers. That simple story right there is like, hey, I've got this. Now, I called a lot of shippers with larger hiring indexes, and they use in-house brokers or have own trucks. Yeah, there's going to be those situations where, you're going to get that. We just know from an algorithm perspective, yeah, they are using a broker, or they are hiring people that may be newer, and so we rate them a little bit higher. Right? So that is going to happen with the hiring index, but it is going to eliminate, as far as time, it's going to eliminate and help you choose those better. In fact, something that I find very interesting, Kim, and everybody watching is, we can sort by this.
Yep.
I don't know if you mind popping over there real quick. We can sort by this, and it'll help you, with that. The other thing too, I would take into consideration, Kim, is, what's the volume of these guys? Are they a low shipper? Are they high? They're very high. They're mega. The bigger they are, the more complex they've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And the reason why they've gotten complex is because they've had growing pains getting to that mega shipper or the very high shipper, right? So I like that you can sort this by hiring index now. Kudos to the developers here. They're incredible. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and just switch it up some days. We did this last time I did cold calls. I said, I'm going to try to call low volume shippers with the highest hiring index I could find. And how we did that is you can just sort by size, right? And I went to the back page,
right,
and worked it backwards.
Yep.
Right. And that's a little secret sauce right there.
Yeah.
Let's see what's, because everyone wants a whale. But
right.
I tell you what, folks, whales take forever, A. But B, what if they have an in-house brokerage and they have their own carriers? The bigger they are, the more complex they've gotten to, right?
Yep.
What did we hear from that one shipper? Remember that? We were at TIA,
mm-hmm.
and there's one shipper's like, well, if they're not doing 50 million or 100 million, or what was it? Do you remember?
Something like that.
Was it 200 million? Something crazy.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, if you're not doing, 200 million in revenue, we're not interested in working with you.
Right. And everyone's replaceable too. Everyone's, relationship may not go as planned a year from now. So,
yeah.
How can you provide a better solution for that shipper? That's what they want to hear, solutions.
Yeah. Timing's everything.
Timing is...
There's a company that's on our platform that I've seen. There's a company on our platform, and I love this. One of the guys that we've had do cold calls with us, truly an incredible sales guy, and has been chasing the same shipper for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And every quarter he follows up, and they tell him the same thing every damn quarter. Yeah, we're not expanding our brokerage list. Yeah, we just aren't interested in working with you. He hears the same thing all the time. He continues to provide value to them quarterly.
Mm-hmm. He's
kind of put them on the back burner.
Right.
But hey, every 3 months I'm going to send a hook out and see what happens. Yeah. Guess what happened Monday? He sent a hook out, and they were like, hey, we've had some change in our process and logistics. The person retired. Okay. And guess what? He has the opportunity to get in now.
Nice.
And now he's filling out this application. He's having a conversation with them next week, and away they go.
So it's just about doing the work and setting those reminders and being kind of disciplined in a way. That's a really good example, though.
Yeah. I love. This is probably why we built this too. If you go back in, that bell, honestly, and getting people into where they need to be. It's just consistency. And then honestly, if you change them from a cold call to all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is a cold lead. We're not going anywhere with this guy. Right. It'll change our system for you. So just say that real quick. You can put some notes in there, but hey, this guy's it's not working out. And then we also had another question the other day. He said, hey, I've been putting a lot of these people in these buckets, but I don't know how to pull that up. How do you pull that up, Nate?
Yeah, and what Jared means by the bucket, adding that filter, and then where you find all those is under the shipper tab, and then you'll see notes and lists.
Yeah.
And then this is where you'll see every shipper that essentially you marked, right? Current customer to do, pass, cold lead, right? So this will help definitely keep everything organized and understand that, that shipper's not interested or whatever it may be. So
yeah, I really do think I've been watching some of our power users lately. And hey, Ryan, what's up, man? It's good to see you. I'm glad you're on. I've been watching some of the habits of our power users. We got a few power users that are just constantly grinding through our site. And it's interesting. I was asking their sales manager the other day, and this is a smaller brokerage. I think they got, 15 brokers. And I was saying, hey, I see you guys using the site daily. I see you guys working the different categories that we have within our shipper list. And he goes, I tell you what, Jared, he goes, now, not only can I go in and look and see, you see how the users are right there?
Yep.
They can go in and look and say, well, here's who they've bookmarked this, but now he's going, hey, now our guys are more, organized. I'm seeing we're closing more shippers.
Okay.
Even in this timing where the economy sucks, shippers are trying to stop getting phone calls and getting squeezed so hard, and now they're using this for that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
It's truly helpful. I mean, you wouldn't think it would be a game changer, but it truly is. I mean, like you said, help them close more shippers because you're staying organized. You're doing what you need to as far as contacting those shippers every 3 months, right? And you may get that a lot, but actually do it. See what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
he said every time they close a shipper, they do a hack session. So they love hacky sack in that office apparently, and so it's one of those things. Ryan asked, when cold calling, do you see a greater success during certain days or times? That's a good question. Yeah. Tarjet says, I like this so I can follow up and keep organized. Is there any way to download it to an Excel? Great questions.
Yeah, Tarjet, no, there's not a way to download to Excel. We'll keep them posted on there.
Yeah, with our shipper database, because of how we get it, it has to stay enclosed within Ecarriercheck. But, great question. Mm-hmm. You can export carrier lists, things like that, and take them out to a CSV or an Excel file, right? But, from our shipper's perspective, no, there's not. But, Ryan, when cold calling, do you see greater, success during certain days or times?
I think
this is an interesting.
Yeah,
give it
so from what my experience has been, is you definitely got to be on top of the time zones, and then also
maybe go into that because that's pretty funny actually. You say that. Go into that a little.
I've had freight brokers calling me saying, hey, the shippers not answering. Well, they're on the East Coast and they're probably closed.
Yeah.
So when there's a good time of day, honestly, I see a lot of people don't call shippers on Mondays because they're trying to get everything together. They just got back from the weekend. So they sometimes do it on Tuesdays. I've heard some success. But I've also heard success in the mornings. And I don't know if that's just, with that region, with that person they're calling in that region, maybe it's a better time to call in the mornings but that's kind of what I heard. Mornings and probably not on Mondays. Maybe Fridays. Sometimes they're hard. Yeah. I know we do it on Fridays.
We do.
Sometimes we get really lucky and we get those shippers to pick up. But.
Yeah. I used to do this thing, and Ryan, to answer your question, my opinion is exactly with Nate. I would call in the mornings, afternoons get busy, and as just as people, I don't know about you, but if I was going to measure my efficiency in my day, which I look at, I'm more productive in the morning than I am in the afternoon. Right? Maybe I ate too big of a lunch, or maybe I'm thinking about what my kids are doing after work, or what I need to do after work, or whatever's going on, right? We all have the same, we're all humans, right? This happens. I always find that more productivity is in the morning, in that. Now, here's something that I did one time. You ever play Around the World in basketball?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you do the 2 shots from the sides, and then, you just kind of work around the entire 3-point line.
Yeah.
I've done that same thing with cold calling before. I used to call it sunrise calls.
Okay.
And and we live in mountain time, okay?
Right.
So what I would do is I would start my day. This is really ridiculous, but it was kind of entertaining. I would start my day cold calling on the East Coast, okay? And I'd make 10 calls on the East Coast. And as the day progressed, I'd make 10 calls in Central, 10 calls in Mountain, 10 calls in West Coast, and then just to put some butter on it, I would call Hawaii.
I love that.
And a couple mistakes that I made.
Okay.
There's some mistakes with this idea. Loved the idea. It was very entertaining until we got a client in Hawaii and I was working at 10 o'clock at night because it's friggin' 4 in the afternoon. Okay. Yeah. So I take that for what it is. You need to work. You gotta work in the time zones that make the most sense for you when it comes to cold calling. So when you're doing your homework here, I wouldn't recommend bringing on somebody from Hawaii.
That's awesome.
Demetrius, what's he say here? Love Ecarriercheck. I'm on it every day. Just amazed by it. Similar to the lead gen I use to use a TQL. Only question I have is how to find shippers close to your location versus destination. What an interesting question. The way we put this in, is you kind of have OD pairs, right? And so I'll give you an example. Just search a location and we'll pull one of these examples up of what he's talking about here. Just go into anywhere. Yeah. Do a city though. I should have been more, do any city that you think will be entertaining. Yeah, Atlanta sounds good. Okay. So just pop in here, maybe search that closer even. Go into like 50, go to 50 miles. Let's see if we can pinpoint this like immediately, right? Okay, so if we go into let's just do CP food products and hit the old magnifying glass. Where are these guys out of, right? Go back. I'm Charlotte, by the way. Oh, I like that. Scroll down real quick. Let's see if we can see. Go back up. Maybe just go into LinkedIn and see if they show where they're out of. Oh, that's okay. You're not signed in on this computer. I get that. We're in our studio thing here. Let's try a different one. Go to Dairy Processing Deerfield, right? Let's just try that cat. Okay, so this guy's from Deerfield, Kansas, but we're searching in Atlanta, right? So how we put this in here, Demetrius? Oh, he's in Charlotte. I love that. What a great town.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is we kind of hit the ODE pairs, and we'll put them in showing both, right? So there are those moments where how does Deerfield show up in Atlanta? Well, it's because there was some OD involved when we get that, right? That information. Right. So I know that's kind of random, but to answer your question real quick, let's just put in Charlotte real quick.
Yep.
In the hot button up there, go up to the hot seat. Yeah, just type in Charlotte real quick, right?
Yeah.
And if you live, I know we've been having some spelling issues. If you live, is that how you spell Charlotte?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. If you live in a unique city, okay, more so,
I know where you're going.
it's not, Charlotte's a unique city, right? Atlanta is a unique city, right? But look at this, all these companies. Nice job spelling Charlotte. I struggle with spelling. That's all. I mean, we're from Nebraska, right? But if you type in the city that you live in, you may find some opportunities that you didn't even know.
Yeah, and actually, it's a really good example. Glad you brought that up. We did the same thing for Chicago. This lady was out of Chicago. We did that exact same thing. So a really good example.
Yeah. So anybody that's named this, the other thing that I used to use this for, back in the day, as we transitioned from, I went into working from an asset-based carrier to, a brokerage, right? When I transitioned, and as I was leaving, I was in national account sales. And what would happen is because of the company I worked for, they only regionally managed freight in some particular, like we would go from Denver to Chicago.
Right.
Well, how was I supposed to know if Best Buy had a DC in our region for me to call them?
Right.
Well, guess what I'd do, right?
Yeah.
And we built this internally before we started launching it and letting people have it. So I would just go in, right. And do that. So I would be curious, Demetrius, if you had any thoughts on Jordan selling, the Charlotte Hornets. Kind of an interesting sell thing going on there. But definitely, what a great question.
Yeah.
I know that does happen when you're doing some of that aspect.
Yeah, and there's other ways too that you can kind of go through on Ecarriercheck, Demetrius, is do it the way we just did, right? Location, or type in Charlotte up in that smart bar. where it says what are you looking for, and then just tell them to look, shippers with that in their name, or maybe find some carriers in that area and see if we can find some, some leads out of their info.
Yeah.
And then start prospecting those shippers.
I would be kind of curious to do that same thing. We just did, we looked up pipe shippers. What if we just look up, let's go over to carriers and talk about what you're talking about there.
Okay.
And just do it by location. We were just in wherever, Charlotte looks good, right? But let's see if there's carriers. And you might leave this out a little bit just because finding specific carriers that are hauling pipe could be a little bit. So just throw it out there. Yeah. And just see who may be working in the pipe world. So there's 510 pages. That's just a boat of people. Let's just type in the commodity keyword of pipe and see how many. Okay, look at this. Sand, rock, and concrete pipe. Okay. Concrete pipe, right?
Yeah.
So if we're trying to find specific, carriers,
this is a good way.
This is a great way of doing it. And then, what Nate was talking about a moment ago was just, traveling through some of our data that's right here.
Right.
And you can see, rinker materials or Kilpaw, could be, I can't read that.
I can't either.
Man, I tell you what, I think you and I need to get
I think so too.
We're going to be sitting here at 70 years old breaking down shippers.
Right.
And we can't see a thing. We're going to have our glasses.
Yeah.
We'll just be like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right.
But that's another story.
And this guy's shipping everywhere too. Look at that.
Yeah. A lot of carriers, lot going on. I'm a big fan of that. That's a big shipper.
Right.
Oh, that's an Indian tribe.
Yeah. Interesting.
That is. Yeah, they consume a lot of product.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can get into some Indian tribes. I actually used to work with an Indian tribe.
That's awesome.
They weren't as big as this, like when I'm looking at them as a volume.
Right.
But it's an interesting, they've got golf courses, they got casinos.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a lot of consumables. Hell, some of them, are raising crop,
Wow.
that they sell, right? So some of the bulk stuff that I was into had to do with them. And,
that's fun.
it was actually a very interesting. It wasn't the hugest account, but I liked it.
Right.
Let me see what he's got here. You transitioned. Hey. Yeah, exactly. We love the software. I wish were introduced. This is our second month using it. Love it. I love that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For those of you on, obviously, we grow organically. We don't have a huge marketing budget. So giving us reviews on Google is always helpful. Or commenting on some YouTube stuff, always helpful. But we appreciate you guys. We love our community.
Oh, 100%.
We're just trying to grow each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? We all grow. Let's go.
Yeah.
The industry is going to be better. Such a big fan. Anything else that we're covering off on today, Nate?
I'm trying to think of some other things that we have. If you guys have any questions or maybe something we can run, definitely let us know. And we can do it really quick. We're not in a big hurry today. We love to help you guys and see what we can do for you.
Yeah.
If not, I do have a banner going across the bottom. Go sign up for some demos and see what, the site looks like when you get some time. And if you have any questions, give us a call. And we can kind of talk that way. Reefer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hit up some reefer shippers.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of our reefer data.
Yeah.
This one is really apparent when I'm looking to, and I talk to, we have a handful of brokers that we deal with that are specifically in the reefer space.
Yep.
And boy, I tell you what, this one is one of my favorites. So we have our quality of set of data with reefers is it's over the top.
That's awesome. I love it too.
So, take the time to if you're in the reefer space, we're going to have some incredible reefer leads.
Yeah.
So
reefer space is a little bit different. You got to do some homework on that.
Yeah.
Temperature. All that stuff.
You got to know seals and you got to know some of that game. When Shaggy comes on, I don't know if he's still on or not. But I tell you what, Shaggy does a map and he talks about, seasonally placed items that are moving across the country. Right. Shaggy, dominated in trucking. Right. And he's doing the same thing in brokerage, but he's also done a lot of training, been around the block for a long time.
Yeah.
And the reefer space is kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
So
Tarja, there's definitely a lot of leads there. It's definitely, it's worth the time going through some of these leads and, see if we can find a good prospect.
I'm kind of curious. Go to Reefer Box Truck on the left side over there. Just let's see how many of these guys are using like box trucks. and then sort it by, just sort it by, just hiring index. Gold Star Foods, interesting. It'd be really interesting to call some of these guys that are using some of these box trucks.
Mm-hmm.
We get so many box truck questions, Sprinter vans, box trucks, Sprinter vans,
yeah.
box trucks, right? And it'd just be so interesting to do that. One more question: how can you use this to your advantage as a dispatcher? Man, what a great question. Nate, I'll let you kind of dive into this one.
Well, we never really dive into brokers a whole lot. So this is a really good question. It's a good idea. So we do have brokers. Dispatchers are on my site constantly trying to find brokers in areas that their carriers are running to. Or if I'm for example, if I'm a dispatcher out of Atlanta, well, let's find some brokers in my area. Let's see where we can kind of team up together, grow each other's business that way. So you can find brokers in our system. Doesn't hurt to kind of start there sometimes, or
go into the depth of it though, because I think this is really interesting. We'll just stay in Charlotte. Okay. I think it's important as a dispatcher to differentiate yourself, as you're more than just getting something off a load board, right? Right. You're, even if it's just a foot in the door, right? Right. Click on the website thing, and in some particular cases, you can find people that right on our website, because of how we scraped. Look at this, all the different social media links across there. You can see, what they're doing. If you go over the middle, you'll see actually what they're doing. And so, as a dispatcher, obviously we recommend you getting on here and looking at, let's find some new brokers. Let's go into carriers, start to call them. Right. Obviously, our data is fairly robust. Something that's really interesting too is go back out to the homepage. Something that should be up to date here very, very soon. You can see the recently added carriers. We just got new data. So we'll be uploading that in later today, actually. Yeah. But our monitoring files, those are going to be for prospecting as well. So if you're trying to find those new authorities, those new people, you'll be able to literally go in, download a PDF, and get that right there. Right. Insane. Yep. That'll be opening up here soon. We should have that. We're kind of doing some testing and making sure everything is working. So great question. How do you take advantage as a dispatcher? You can stay organized. You got up-to-date data.
And you can get really niche with this. As a dispatcher, maybe I'm going to call their smaller companies. Well, let's now have a list with those smaller companies, right? Yep. Or if I'm a new dispatcher, I see some people doing this too as well, but finding those newer carriers, maybe less than 3 months old, they probably haven't booked a load. How are they finding their loads? Do they have relationships? Yep. Well, guess what? You have enough relationships with brokers. Yep. That's probably music to their ears. Yeah. Dedicated lanes, not on the load board. You know what I mean? Way you go. Yeah. Love it. So lots of ways dispatchers can use this site. It's kind of get in here, playing around, and just kind of being open-minded with your marketing strategies and picking up the phone and calling. Yeah, for sure. So, I love it. And you can call from the site, which I love. I know we blur it out, but if I'm a dispatcher, I'd probably be hitting this baby up quite often. Yeah, you can literally just hook it up to your cell phone, and away you go. Right. And then just start to organize yourself, set alerts, call the guy back next week. It's almost like this weird set it and forget it sort of thing. Just, in my mind, what I used it for was I opened up, my clients' websites or client communication. So I had my email open. I had, I usually had the local news open, and I had Ecarriercheck open. Yeah. And it's just, I need to call this guy today. Right. Kind of almost becomes your business plan each day. Right. You know what I mean? And let's be real, brokers should have this site up who are on today. And as carriers do call in on loads, we should be, vetting them, right? So immediately, what risk are they at, and just going, right? So we've talked about a risk radar a few times when we talked through that. But, we appreciate everyone being on. Obviously, there's a lot of meat right there. From our social media sites to our searches to even just this. Go back down. Obviously, we have updated fuel. That's this week's fuel, right? Where's it at per the country? We have today's weather. We're in kind of this weird little thing going on right now today. So, we've got it all right here for you that allow you to do that. We have some other eggs that are on our site I won't really get into, but you'll be able to find, other entertaining things that are right in our website and help you guys through the day and go from there. So, and it looks like we're going to be getting storm. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's coming. At 1:00 today, we're going to be in a mess. Yeah. So, Well, I don't have anything else for the
I don't
group.
either. It was really good questions today. Thank you for being on.
We do have another show coming on Friday. We'll have Nick Lease. We're going to be talking health benefits.
Yeah, that should be kind of interesting. They do our benefits, and I really enjoy it. So
and Nick's a good guy. He's definitely going to help. Hopefully those that show up understand just the benefits of having the health insurance. Maybe there's some questions that you guys don't know what you should be asking or maybe where to go. So Nick will definitely be a big help. Yeah,
in our studio, we're going to have to scoot over.
We'll sit right
Put
here.
right in the middle, and let's just work through it. So love it. Guys, have a great day. Thanks for being on. You guys are rock stars. I love our community. It's so great. So
thanks, everyone.
questions